In today's episode, we travel back to November 14th, 1996. Because that was the day the original Tomb Raider was released on PC. It is one of those titles that did not just become successful, but truly helped shape an entire era of 3D gaming. The game was developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive. It first appeared on the Sega Saturn, and shortly after that it arrived on MS-DOS, which was the PC platform of that time. In Europe, the PC version was released a few days later on November 22nd, 1996.
What's a man gotta do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Well, great. Though truth is, it ain't me that wants you.
Oh?
No, Miss Jacqueline Natla does, from Natla Technologies. You know, creator of all things bright and beautiful.
Seal it, Larson.
Ma'am.
Feast your eyes on this, Lara. How does that make your wallet rumble?
I'm sorry. I only play for sport.
Then you'll like a big park. Peru, vast mountain ranges to cover, sheer walls of ice, rocky crags, savage winds, and there's this little trinket, an age-old artifact of mystical powers buried in the unfound tomb of Qualapec. That's my interest. You could leave tomorrow. Are you busy tomorrow?
Looking at the first Tomb Raider today, it is easy to say, old character models, sharp edges, and rough visuals. But in 1996, this was something truly special. Right from the beginning, the game stood out because of its atmosphere, its large 3D environments, and the way it combined exploration, jumping, climbing, combat, and puzzle solving. It was not just a shooter, and it was not just a platformer. Tomb Raider gave players the feeling of discovering unknown places, and that was a huge part of what made it so impressive at the time. In this game, we play as Lara Croft, a character who very quickly became one of the biggest icons in video game history. Lara is an archaeologist and adventurer. She is hired to recover a mysterious artifact known as the Scion of Atlantis. But it soon becomes clear that the story is much bigger, more dangerous, and far stranger than it first seemed. This was the game that started the entire Tomb Raider franchise, and Lara herself almost immediately became a pop culture phenomenon. One of the strongest parts of the original Tomb Raider is its atmosphere. Many games from that era focused mainly on fast action or simple arcade-style fun, but here we got something very different. For a large part of the game, we are almost completely alone, surrounded by ancient ruins, traps, silence, and music that is used very sparingly, which only makes it more powerful. Instead of constant noise, the game creates tension, mystery, and the feeling that every new step might reveal something important or trigger something dangerous. Another thing that made the game stand out was its level design. The developers did not build simple, flat stages. Instead, they created multi-layered environments with vertical structure, full of jumps, ledges, tunnels, chambers, and hidden paths. Today, that may sound normal, but back then it felt fresh and impressive. Tomb Raider forced the player to observe the surroundings, judge distances, plan movement, and stay careful. You really had to watch where you were going, because one bad jump could easily send you falling down or back to an earlier save. And that is one of the things that defines the original Tomb Raider so well. This game does not hold the player's hand. It does not cover the screen with hints. It does not mark everything for you, and it does not constantly tell you where to go. Instead, it gives you room to figure things out on your own. Sometimes that leads to satisfaction when you solve something. Sometimes it leads to frustration when you are not sure what to do next. But because of that, the adventure feels more real. You do not feel like someone following markers on a map. You feel like someone truly exploring ancient tombs. Lara's movement is also an important part of the experience. In the first Tomb Raider, movement feels fairly stiff and very precise. You have to understand your steps, your distances, and the exact timing of a jump. For modern players, this can feel strange at first because the controls are nowhere near as smooth as they are in modern action games. But once you get into the rhythm of it, you begin to understand that this system actually had a purpose. It was not just accidental awkwardness. The game was designed so that movement had weight, and platforming sections required precision. Because of that, every successful jump feels more satisfying. Of course, Tomb Raider is not only about exploration and jumping. Combat is also part of the experience. Lara spends most of the game using her iconic pistols, which became one of the symbols of the series. But even with combat included, I think the game is at its strongest when it simply lets us be alone with the ruins, the architecture, and the mystery of the place. That is the kind of atmosphere that is very difficult to recreate. It is also worth remembering how historically important this title was. Tomb Raider arrived at a time when the industry was moving deeper into full 3D, and developers were still trying to find a new language for game design. Many games were still experimenting with cameras, character movement, and spatial design. Tomb Raider was one of the games that proved a 3D action adventure could work, could be cinematic, and could become a massive hit. The game was developed in around 18 months, and its budget was about £440,000, which sounds unbelievably small by today's standards for a title that would go on to launch such a huge franchise. Development began in 1994, and the team behind it was relatively small. That also shows how different game development was in the 1990s. Smaller teams, smaller budgets, but often very bold ideas. Another interesting detail is the early concept of Lara Croft herself. In very early ideas, the main character was closer to a male adventurer in the style of Indiana Jones. Only later was the concept changed, and the team ultimately decided to build the game around a female protagonist. That decision turned out to be absolutely crucial, because Lara Croft very quickly became the face of the franchise and one of the most recognizable characters in the entire industry. Lara's appearance and development were shaped in part by Toby Gard, who is widely recognized as her creator. The character design drew from different pop culture influences, but the final result was so distinctive that Lara quickly took on a life of her own beyond the game itself. She appeared in advertisements, on magazine covers, and became one of the symbols of gaming in the second half of the 1990s. The music also deserves special mention. It was used sparingly, and that worked perfectly for the game's atmosphere. Instead of playing constantly in the background, it appeared only in important moments, which made it far more effective. It is one of those cases where silence and sound were balanced extremely well. Combined with empty ruins and the echo of footsteps, it created an unforgettable feeling of a lonely journey into the unknown. If someone has never played the first Tomb Raider, they might bounce off the controls or the rough presentation today, and that is completely understandable. But if you look at the game in the context of its time, it becomes very easy to understand why it made such a huge impact. This was an ambitious, distinctive, and bold title. It did not try to copy everything around it. It chose its own path, and that is exactly why it earned its place in gaming history. What is interesting is that Tomb Raider was not just the success of one game. It was the beginning of a major series that would later receive sequels, reboots, and new interpretations. But for many players, the original Tomb Raider still remains the most special because it had something raw, mysterious, and pioneering about it. You can really feel that this came from a moment when the industry was still discovering what 3D games could become. And I think that is exactly why this game is still worth revisiting. Not only to see the origins of Lara Croft, but also to remember what it looked like when developers were still learning how to build large-scale adventures in 3 dimensions. Tomb Raider is almost like a time capsule, a moment in gaming history when everything was still taking shape, but it was already clear that something important was happening. Looking at this title today, you can notice many things that later became standard. Third-person exploration, an acrobatic protagonist, a cinematic action-adventure style, huge environments full of secrets, and the combination of combat and puzzles. All of that would later grow in many other series. But here, we are looking at one of the most important starting points for that direction. So when we talk about games that truly left a mark on history, Tomb Raider from 1996 absolutely deserves its place. It was not only the beginning of a legendary series, it was also one of the games that helped define what a 3D action-adventure could be in the second half of the 1990s. And that was Tomb Raider. The game that introduced Lara Croft to the world took players into ancient ruins and helped set the direction for 3D action-adventure games. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and subscribe so you do not miss the next journey through gaming history. And in the comments, let me know. Did you ever play this original Tomb Raider? Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Gaming Time Machine.